Yo, what's up chefs? Welcome back to our ultimate 0 to hero challenge on Ret Paladin, where one mistake equals one punishment. And this time, we're just going to be hopping straight into it. Kicking things off with a +6 Arakara, and I wanted to be doing +7s and above at this point, but it took us at least 20 plus minutes just to get into this +6, so it'll have to do. And this first pull was a little bit wonky. The tank kind of cut the typical pull where you go all the way to the mini boss in half, which I don't mind in a pug group, but usually with that style you would want to drag everything into an attendant, but instead he decided to stop and try to chain pull the attendant into us, which doesn't really work out nearly as well. After that though, we made quick work of the 3 mini-bosses, despite the tank continuing to make some interesting pull decisions, such as pulling 0 trash into the second mini-boss, all of which just amounted to some wasted time here and there. It wasn't until we got to the first boss where the tank was very adamant that everyone stand precisely where he wanted them to, that we started to have a bit of an issue. See, I understood what he was going for as far as making sure nobody was dragging the ads into the boss, but I don't know if he forgot what class I was playing or that I have to be in melee range of the boss to do damage, but he specifically wanted me to stand in a position where I was not in melee range of the boss. Tank is like freaking out, but how, like bro, I need to be in melee, you fuck. Unfortunately, I let this stuff get to my head and ended up completely spacing out at the time that the second Gossamer onslaught came through, and I just ended up soaking it all up like a moron, which is definitely going to qualify as an at-fault death and result in us having to spin the punishment wheel a bit later. Thankfully, it didn't result in a full-on wipe, and we were able to move on to the trash leading up to the second boss, where we made the decision to go left, which I am definitely a major fan of personally. In this section, the pulls were pretty solid overall, such as this one, but we still had some like this one that were completely off the mark and definitely resulted in a significant chunk of wasted time.
Your ascension is complete.
Following that, we cleaned up the second boss with minimal issues and made our way towards the third boss, where we decided to take the left path once again, which did result in some relatively nice sized pulls for me, where I was able to pump out some pretty massive numbers, getting up to over 3 million DPS at one point, which felt pretty solid considering our mediocre item level of 615. Finally, we ended up taking care of the third and final boss, just about 30 seconds short of getting a 3 chest, but nevertheless resulting in us getting a solid plus 250 to our IO score, putting us up to a total score of 1395 after just 7 dungeons completed so far in the series. Okay, a little 2 chest on the +6 Arakara. It was definitely a wacky group. Our tank was kinda going crazy the whole time. Oh shit, we got a sack bird. Now, I'm all too familiar with how sought after this trinket is, but we've already acquired some pretty amazing trinkets so far in this journey, so I decided to do a quick sim while the group mulled over about the quirkiness of our tank, and after confirming that it was only going to be a minor upgrade in single target and ultimately a reasonable downgrade in AoE, made the decision to allow damn near the entirety of the group to do a roll-off to decide who I would trade it to. Up next, we're moving on to a +7 City of Threads, one of the few remaining dungeons that we have yet to complete during this challenge. But hold up, y'all didn't think I forgot about the punishment, did you? Easy peasy. In an attempt to try and limit the interruption of actual gameplay, while also continuing to stay true to the challenge, I decided I would go ahead and complete this punishment at the beginning of the following dungeon. However, I could not have anticipated that the sounds made while eating these warheads would be potentially the most annoying thing I have ever heard, so I will only subject you guys to it briefly. Oh my. Now that we got that out of the way, back to the dungeon. And so far, the warheads were not enough to stop us from absolutely cranking out some numbers, as we were sitting at a solid 2.5 million DPS overall so far, with our Frost Decay and Devoker also putting in some solid work. And although not my preferred route to take as a tank, this tank was certainly choosing some really solid and decently sized pulls, which felt amazing. Moving on to the first boss, and this one can be quite dangerous as you are confined to a very limited space, and probably the most dangerous part is the overlap of the frontal cone coming from the boss, as well as these two sets of balls that shoot out upon expiration of the debuff. As you can see here, I almost got one-tapped when I got stuck between the cone and the balls that were coming from my teammate, and if this was a higher level key, I likely would have just died. So it probably would have been a good idea to just send the bubble as soon as I realized I was in a tough spot. After finishing off the first boss, we moved into the RP area and dealt with 3 groups of enemies. It's worth noting in this area that you typically have a lot of time in between packs, so if you're a class with short cooldowns, you shouldn't be afraid to just send them on each of the 3 packs. If you do have longer cooldowns, and depending on the level of the key, you may want to just send them on the second pack so that way you have them back up for the second boss. Up next, we have the second boss, which can also be incredibly lethal on higher level keys. However, if you know what to look out for, you can make your healer's life infinitely easier. So, aside from just dodging the never-ending amount of frontal cones and AoE effects that are going out during this fight, the number one thing you need to look out for as a non-tank player is the icicles and the knife throw bleed effect. And more importantly, if you ever get hit with a bleed effect directly before the icicles come out, then it is imperative that you pop some defensives, otherwise you will likely be a goner. These are defensive there on the ice spikes or whatever they're called. Especially because I was actually targeted by... Maybe res this guy. Especially because I was targeted by the bleed. And although things got dangerously close, other than the one death by our DK during that fight, we were ultimately able to bring it home with no other major issues. Whew. That was pretty close. That boss is usually pretty damn hard, I'm not gonna lie. Thankfully, we squeezed it out. After that, we had a couple of packs where our group's DPS overall was pretty questionable, but I was just straight pumping. Sheesh, 4 million DPS. Let's go.
Your ascension is complete.
Finally, we ended up taking down the third and fourth bosses of the dungeon with minimal issues other than it just being a little bit longer than ideal due to somewhat low DPS coming out from our Frost Decay. Ultimately, we ended up getting a nice little 2 chest, resulting in a solid plus 274 IO score, bringing us up to a total of 1669, meaning that we are likely just a few dungeons away from hitting Keystone Master, and then the remainder of the journey to Keystone Hero is certainly going to be a bit more difficult. Up next, we're hopping into a +7 Siege of Borealis, probably my least favorite dungeon of Season 1, and coincidentally, it just happened to be the only dungeon we had yet to complete at this point. On top of it already being not one of my favorites though, for some reason I was having some major FPS issues for about the first quarter of the dungeon, give or take. I don't know if it's because we had a Beast Mastery Hunter that was summoning a herd of goons every pull, or if it was just the dungeon. Let me know in the comments if you guys have been having any similar FPS issues in this dungeon yourself. Alright, this pull can be pretty scary. You can see our tank is already getting absolutely blasted. I'm getting some pretty bad frame rate lag in this dungeon. Okay, it's cleaning itself up a little bit. Fast forwarding to the first boss, and so far things were going super smooth minus the FPS issues. We had 0 deaths, and our balanced druid was keeping me company at the top of the charts, doing some serious damage. He did happen to be 8 item levels higher than me, all the way up at 623, but I was not complaining. It felt nice to finally have some competition for top DPS in the group. Somehow, I think we missed a bomb towards the end of the kill, so the boss did end up taking a little bit longer than necessary, but it was a pretty clean kill nonetheless. Okay, big damage, big damage. Sure, try and lead this away from the group a little bit. Yo, this guy running away. On to the second boss, and this one is probably one of the most boring bosses in the whole season in my opinion. I swear as a DPS player, it literally feels like you have to dodge a frontal cone once a minute and then dodge the swirlies in between phases, and that's it. Maybe I'm missing something, but either way, we took care of it with no problems. Get that interrupt, help group up the pack. Fortunately, we can't see anything because of these trees.
Your ascension is complete.
Okay. Up to the snipers. Which is a pretty spooky pack, but it looks like our tank knows what to do. Massive DPS that pull. Little 4 mil. Following the banana maze trash, we found ourselves at the third boss, and we were still making pretty solid time, easily on track for another 2 chests. The third boss similarly went pretty smooth, except for whenever our druid decided to do whatever this was. It didn't change much though. We B-resed him up and down the boss. Okay, not bad, not bad. Definitely doing pretty solid DPS so far. 1.4 mil. I think that's pretty good for Siege. Let's make sure we don't die to any of these swirlies. That would be the worst possible way to get a minor punishment. Last but not least, we had the Tentacle Overlord to dispatch, and this one definitely got a little bit squirrely, as it usually tends to do with pug groups. The first oopsie was whenever our tank probably just spaced out a little bit and accidentally got hit by the one-shot goop. Thankfully, we B-resed him instantly and were able to salvage the fight for the time being. After that though, our other druid died somewhere out in Narnia. I think our druids were actually our only deaths, funnily enough, although they both played really well. Either way, I decided to go out and risk it for the B-res, which probably wasn't necessary since we were on the third platform already, but it ended up working out alright. Nice little 2 chest. Solid. 4 deaths, 2 chest, plus 277, almost up to 2k now. Very, very close. Let's go and exchange our key. We got a Grim Batol. We'll actually take that. We got a Warbound. Not terrible.